Rain pounded the harbour windows while he counted the Raffle cash with saintly calm. The room smelled like salt and champagne, and his smile never reached his eyes. By the time we found the missing 18,500, he'd already labelled it float on a spreadsheet no one else could open. The Lighthouse Hotel ballroom had that damp evening glow you only get when all the coats are steamed and the centerpieces lean, wilted from the weather. Dunmore Harbour is small enough that everybody knows whose outboard motor didn't pass inspection and which baker is sleeping with her supplier, but big enough that people dress up for one gala a year and pretend we have donors. We do, technically. They like our community kitchen because it keeps kids fed in the off-season, when fishermen are patching nets and tourists are a memory. They also like feeling important in a town of 2,400 souls, and I've never judged anyone for chasing a feeling that keeps the heat on. Across the raffle table, Wade lined up bundles of notes the way a dealer squares a deck, edges precise, rubber bands color-coded because of course they were. He wore the same navy blazer he'd worn to every monthly meeting since January, clean, frayed at the inside elbow, buttoned like a bright coin. Americans tend to stick out in Waterford unless they learn to half-shout over wind, and he'd learned that quickly. Volunteer accountant, he'd said the first night with a shrug, grinning about how accountants are just frustrated poets. People laughed. I did too. He'd walked in last spring with a stack of paper folders and a promise to put us on rails, so we'd stop handing receipts to each other like trading cards. He had a talent for catching your eye and holding it exactly as long as your confidence needed. No more, no less. The kind of attentive men who memorize first names within the first 2 minutes. That night he asked about the kitchen's freezer, about our need for another combi oven. He cracked a joke about how he'd never worked with as many types of potatoes as we served in a week. When Sean from the Harbour Patrol grumbled about the cost of stainless steel prep tables, Wade leaned in and agreed. Of course, but what if we treated capital expenditures as line items projected across fiscal quarters, because donors loved that? He'd been in court before, he said, something about a first marriage and a consultancy that didn't pan out. Most people don't survive a consultancy that doesn't pan out. They vanish into LinkedIn like ghosts. Wade stuck around. He found places to make himself useful. He produced a Google Drive folder tree that looked like a cathedral. He wrote a manual for the petty cash tin and laminated it like an altar card. He adopted the language of our town faster than I would have thought possible, and still, every now and then, it slipped. Back home, he'd say, then correct to, in the States, then in Chicago, where I grew up, and then stop himself, like the word Chicago bit. The first red flag wasn't even red. It was a pale pink a person could mistake for good taste, the day he told me to stop paying the butcher in cash, because transparency. Of course, I thought, we'd build a paper trail donors loved, but then he also told me to funnel all supplier invoices through a single cloud email he controlled, App Dunmore Community Kitchen, IEE, and to stop using my old Gmail for incoming bills because it's unprofessional. That should have been the yellow tape around a sinkhole, but it felt sensible. I was stretched between menu planning and grant proposals, and when someone offers to untangle your tote of receipts, you drop the tote and run. He introduced small efficiencies like love notes. He built a donor stewardship calendar with birthdays and anniversaries. He learned which contractors smoke and which pretend not to. He had a way with the older men who don't like to be told, coaxing them into compliance without a single raised voice. When a new volunteer, named Petra mid-20s, Czech, hair like a copper penny, started photographing our lunches and posting them to the kitchen's Instagram, Wade messaged me, "We finally look like ourselves," and I believed him. June brought tourists and money and chaos. Wade built a float framework for the contactless terminals we used at the summer street fairs. He dropped little phrases that made me feel provincial if I questioned them. Cash sweep, reconciliation, segregation of duties. "You're already doing great," he said. "This keeps it that way." The only time I saw him ruffled was when he lost a file on his laptop. He tapped the table like a pianist trying to keep time, smiled too wide, swallowed it down. "Autosave is a lie," he said, and pulled a USB drive from his pocket like a magician producing a dove. "Best practice is redundancy," he added, and no one in Dunmore Harbour has equipment fancy enough to argue with redundancy. Our bank was AIB on the quay in Waterford, grey stone, 2 tellers who treat combs like miracles. We'd opened the community kitchen's account there in 2018 with $400 donated by a widow who wrote us a letter explaining how once upon a time, someone brought her a casserole when she didn't have money for coal, and now she wanted to repay the world. I keep her letter in a folder with her roses pressed between wax paper. It is the battery in my chest. At the end of July, we started working toward the gala. Tickets at 45, tables of 10 at 400, because people like pretending they're getting a bargain. Sponsor slots available: gold 5,000, silver 2,500, bronze 1,000. Wade toggled between spreadsheets and layout software like someone arranging chessmen. He booked the Lighthouse Hotel ballroom and struck a deal with the owner for a discounted per head if we included wine from Sean's cousin's shop in Tremor. He convinced 2 musicians from WIT to play for free. He drafted the program down to the minute, including how long the MC would take to thank our tireless volunteers, without making them blush. He made people feel seen. That was his true profession. The first mismatch hit in August. A supplier from Dublin called about a past-due invoice. I didn't recognize the amount: 6,480 for outreach event packs, 180 units, and asked Wade about it. He waved it off like a fly. The grant from the Department of Rural and Community Development covered it. It's booked against September because of accrual accounting. Totally expected. He looked me dead in the eye with that steady, practiced calm. He said, "I'll send you the grant letter if you'd like." And he did. A tidy PDF on letterhead, signed by a name I didn't know, with the right crest and the right jargon. When you don't grow up with an alphabet soup of agencies, official logos become talismans. I saved it to the Google Drive Cathedral and praised him for his organization. The gala night arrived on 20 Orsas, September 2024. Rain did what rain does on the coast, came sideways, then up, then from nowhere. We sold 212 tickets, filled most of the room. Wade had arranged the raffle table like a still life. Bottles, restaurant vouchers, a weekend in a Dungarvan BB. He wore a new tie the color of a bruised plum. He counted cash with his saintly calm. At 10:40 p.m., with the raffle closed and the first guests leaving to rescue babysitters, I noticed he'd moved the cash box into the kitchen behind the ballroom. Not a problem. You move cash to a room with a door. But when I followed, I found the box open, the lid propped with a folded tea towel. He sat with Petra, who was tallying ticket stubs. He touched the tea towel as if it were sacred and said he was doing a sweep. He logged the total in his spreadsheet, saved, exported a PDF, and printed it on the hotel's office printer. He handed me the PDF like a treaty. "Transparency," he said again, and I nodded, reading the figures. Gross raffle: 19,700 cash sales, 8,060 card sales, 11,640 float, 1,200 net cash to deposit, 18,500 variance. 0. If you've ever run a community anything, you know the seduction of neat columns. They are proof of goodness in a world that treats good intentions like pushovers. I kissed the PDF with my eyes and put the cash box in the hotel's safe overnight because the bank was closed and I was not going to sleep with 18,500 next to my kettle. The next morning, I was at AIB by 9:28. The teller with the miracle comb counted until her fingers turned grey from paper dust. I signed the deposit slip, kept the customer copy, and breathed the clean, rectangular air of safety. The floating anxiety I'd carried all summer sat down and drank tea for the first time. On Monday, Wade messaged a tidy scan of the bank's deposit confirmation in our email inbox with a note. "Reconciled to ledger, see cell I-42. I moused over I-42 like a child opening a tiny advent window. It was there, green and clean, 18,500. In October, the butcher called me directly again. He'd never gotten our bank transfer for September. The invoices had been sent to App Dunmore Community Kitchen, i.e., instead of my Gmail, like Wade had requested. I asked Wade. He replied in 3 minutes. "Apologies, batch transfers go on the 15th. He'll see it Tuesday. Attached remittance advice." Attached, in fact, was a blob of PDF that looked like accounting. The butcher calmed down. The Tuesday came and went. He called again, embarrassed, said he hated bothering me, but could we check? I forwarded the remittance advice to the butcher and CC'd Wade. He replied, "Bank hiccup, reissuing now." We paid the butcher in cash that week. I broke our own rule. People think betrayal arrives with drumbeats. It doesn't. It arrives with smooth little explanations that fit your day like puzzle pieces. I kept cooking. We ran the autumn meal plan. Kids ate shepherd's pie and broccoli that tasted better than it looked. Old men took soup home in old jam jars. Wade watched all of it with the satisfied look of a man who believes he has put chaos inside a jar. On 5th of November 2024, a letter arrived from Revenue Commissioners about our PPN number and an annual return. It listed our last filed return as 2023, our current annual return as overdue, and a warning about the possibility of striking off our charitable exemption if we didn't file by 30th November. I sent it to Wade with one line. "I thought you filed this." He called me, voice stretched thin. "I did. Must be a system issue. I'll pop into Waterford tomorrow and sort it." Then, as if remembering to add ordinary words, he asked how the Tuesday volunteers were getting on. It soothed me like a lullaby. The next day, he sent a screenshot of the revenue portal with the word "submitted" in green and a date. Relief again. The first true crack opened in December. Petra came to me white-faced about a bank statement she'd seen on the office printer when she'd gone to pick up laminated menu cards. It was a new account name, Dunmore Community Initiatives. Our charity's registered name is Dunmore Community Kitchen, CLG. I stared at the words like they were in mirror script. The IBAN was an AIB IBAN, but with a different end. She had walked the page to my desk as if carrying an egg. "Is that us?" she asked. I heard rain against the windows. I heard nothing else. I asked Wade. I did not accuse. I said, "What is Dunmore Community Initiatives?" He replied, "The umbrella I set up to simplify grant intake. We talked about this. Some grants don't allow pass-through to unincorporated projects. It keeps the kitchen clean." He said it the way a surgeon explains a bandage. He said it like a favor. He said, "I put you as signatory. Did you not get the invite from AIB? They're terrible with emails." He CC'd a banker named RR with an unreadable surname and a Waterford number. The banker wrote back in 20 minutes, happy to discuss. She confirmed on the phone there was, in fact, an account named Dunmore Community Initiatives, opened in September, with 2 signatories, Wade Harper and my name. I told her I had not set up any second account. She paused long enough for me to count 3 breathless seconds. She said carefully that AIB would investigate and that, for now, she would place a hold on all outgoing transfers from that account pending verification of authorization. She said more quietly that if fraud had occurred, AIB had a process. When I got off the phone, I checked our charity's bank balance. It was 2,417. The gala had taken in over 39,000 gross. After expenses, we should have had over 24,000 sitting there, warm and patient. We had 2,417. I printed every bank statement from July through December. I circled each transfer like a frightened teacher. From our main account to Dunmore Community Initiatives. 12,000 on 22nd September, with the memo float recon. 5,000 ounce on 3rd October, supplier pass-through. 3,500 on 14th October, DRCD grant cover. 4,800 on 31st October, year-end adjustment. A steady salon of money stepping across a hallway like guests going to smoke. The receiving account then paid a string of merchants. Seaview Consultancy, Port Marketing, Eagle Point Services. The names sounded like glossy business parks off a motorway exit. I asked Wade to come in. He arrived in a rain shell and a smile, wiped his feet, poured himself tea like he owned the kettle. I put the printouts in front of him. I watched his face like it was a barometer. His mouth flickered 1 degree. He had a script for this. He told me Seaview was his friend's contracting firm that had handled the gala sound. He said Port Marketing was the social media vendor we'd used for paid posts. He swore we'd agreed at the September board meeting to consolidate money so we could show grants clean inflow. He asked why I was trying to make this personal, then added a chuckle. Of course it feels that way. Paperwork is hostile to emotion. He had answers stacked like cups. I asked for invoices. He pulled them up in a shared drive. PDFs, letterheaded. The Seaview Consultancy logo was crisp and boring. The Port Marketing address was a unit in a park in Tremor. The Eagle Point Services said Accounts Eagle Point Services. IE, and I swung to the computer to Google. No such website. A yellow flag turned red. "I need you to step back from finances immediately," I said. "I need the passwords. I need you to not touch anything else." He raised his hands, palms out. "This is what happens when people do heroic work. It starts feeling like a fiefdom. You're exhausted. You're making enemies out of tools." He had that half smile that comes from knowing how other women had doubted themselves in other rooms. He stood, deliberate. "Happy to hand things off," he said, "but you're going to find it painful without me." I called a solicitor in Waterford, O'Shea Brennan. We scheduled a meeting for 12th of December. I brought 3 Polly Pockets of documents, the bank statements, the fake-looking invoices, and a printout of our Constitution. I had not slept. In the lobby, a court Christmas wreath sagged like a tired halo. The solicitor, a woman with reading glasses tethered by a chain, asked me to explain in order. She drew a timeline, neat boxes for each month, dark pen for transfers. She asked for exact dates: 22 in September, 3rd in October, 14th October, 31st October. She asked for sums: 12,000, 5,000, 3,500, 4,800. She asked where the money went: 3 vendors and an ATM cash withdrawal of 1,200 from an AIB machine on 29th September at 11:08 a.m. I hadn't seen the ATM line before. The bank statement revealed it like a bruise. She explained words like misappropriation and breach of trust and conversion. She explained that charities are treated seriously by the courts. She asked if we had a conflict of interest policy. I nodded. She asked if he'd signed it. He had. She said we should lodge a complaint with the Gardaí and with the charities regulator, immediately. The Garda station in Waterford smelled the way Garda stations smell. Coffee and a sense of time stretched taut. I told a sergeant everything. He took notes like small flakes of paper were the only thing anchoring us to law. He asked gentle questions that made me feel clever when I found a specific date. He gave me a reference number, ECF 2002-41-1028. He said Economic Crime Bureau would review and likely call me after Christmas. He told me to contact our bank's fraud unit with that reference. He said to keep copies of everything and not to confront the suspect further if I could avoid it. Avoiding Wade turned out to be impossible. He texted me that night, no chat logs here, just the sense of a man composing, then deleting, then composing again, telling me that I was getting bad advice, that he'd protected us from a revenue audit that would have crushed us, that if I escalated this, donors would disappear, because no one likes stains. He hinted that he could fix it if we walked back the AIB hold. He called Petra twice. She stepped into the hallway, returned white-faced, said he'd told her she had influence over me. She laughed then, a sound with no humour. On 14th December, I emailed the charities regulator with a formal report, attaching the bank statements and vendor invoices. I listed the sums, the dates, the plausible-sounding shell names. I noted that Dunmore Community Initiatives was not our registered name, that I had not authorised the account, and that our trustees had convened an emergency meeting to suspend the volunteer accountant from all duties pending investigation. We signed the letter, me, Sean, and Anne-Marie, who runs the post office and knows every person's middle name. The trustees met that night in the community hall, under the buzzing light that makes everyone look like they're being interviewed for a crime they didn't commit. We passed a motion thanks to Anne-Marie's son, a law student, who texted us the wording to suspend Wade, revoke access to any credentials we controlled, and inform all vendors that any invoices must be reissued to our legal entity and verified by me and one trustee. We recorded the motion in minutes even though our hands shook. We changed the Google passwords. The AP email password reset went to his personal Gmail, which he'd used as the recovery email, which I should have caught and didn't. The absence felt like an error message you hear in your bones. On 16th of December, AIB Fraud called me at 8:19 a.m., a woman named Karen, crisp, careful. She confirmed the Dunmore Community Initiatives account had been opened with an application that included my name and PPS number. She read the address used, our community kitchen's address. She read the phone number, Wade's mobile. She said the ID verification had been done digitally and that a selfie had been provided his. She said they would escalate internally and that any funds left in that account were now frozen. She would not tell me the balance. She did say we should expect a formal letter and to consider filing a Garda complaint if we hadn't already. I gave her the reference number. The call felt like stepping on shore after a storm. Your legs still wobble, but the ground is real. Christmas in a small town doesn't stop for your administrative collapse. People still need puddings and meat and jokes about the weather. I cooked through it, shoulders up, face steady. Wade sent a long email on 20th December, copying a dozen people, proclaiming that he was taking a step back due to toxicity. It read like a resignation if you glanced, and like a manifesto if you read it twice. He hinted at internal mismanagement predating my involvement, which was clever, because any small organization is porous around the edges. Truth makes a good source for lies. On 6th of January 2025, the Gardaí called. An officer from the Economic Crime Bureau asked me to come in and bring everything. We sat for 2 hours. He asked for a list of everyone with access to bank accounts. He asked for notes of the emergency trustee meeting. He asked for our constitution again, circled the lines about fiduciary duty. He asked when I first suspected something was wrong. He asked why I hadn't acted sooner. I told him the truth, because I believed him, because he made it seem like kindness to let paperwork be his chore. The officer didn't smirk. He just wrote. The next Tuesday, I went to the butcher with a bank draft for the full overdue amount, $9,720. He called me love, the way old Irishmen do to both soothe and scold. He said, "We should have trusted our instincts the first time." He was not wrong, but instincts are shy when people are clever at making you feel provincial. The escalation started in February. Wade turned up at the kitchen door, not loud, just present, hands empty, smile off. He told Anne, the Wednesday soup volunteer, he was there to pick up paperwork I'd forgotten to give him. She told him to leave. He circled the block. He watched the door like a cat watches a crack under the fridge. He messaged Petra on Instagram with a nice then needling tone. He sent me 3 emails asking for a copy of the financial year 2023 preliminary ledger, as if we were still doing business. I logged every contact in a spreadsheet with dates and times and any witnesses. I added photos when he waited outside, 1 foot on the curb, like he belonged to the town more than we did. I sent this log to the Gardaí and to the solicitor. The solicitor suggested I apply for a safety order if he kept appearing, a civil order that would make return visits actionable. I filled out the form, wrote each visit in tidy letters that made me feel like a clerk at a border I never asked to guard. If this sounds like a story about numbers and men, then let me introduce Giacomo. He'd been in Ireland 6 months, from Barry by way of London by way of a divorce. Early 40s, hair curls that didn't care about weather. An auditor by training who'd come to Waterford to teach part-time at the Institute and to surf the wrong coast as an act of stubbornness. A friend of a friend told him we needed help reviewing our books for a grant application that hadn't been destroyed by all this. He offered to look for free one evening in March because he remembered what it was like to be new in a town where everyone knew where each other's grandparents were buried. He came to the kitchen after service, rolled up his sleeves, and stood over the spreadsheets like a man reading wind on the water. He saw it fast. Patterns the rest of us couldn't see because our eyes were full of everyday tasks. The naming conventions Wade used, RR 2024 Q3, RR 2024 Q4, looked like grant receipts, but were in fact internal journal entries that moved money between projects into an internal account called Hold. The Hold account then fed the Initiatives account. He mapped transactions on a whiteboard, each line an arrow, each arrow a lesson. He checked IP logs to show which device created the AP email. He found the Seaview Consultancy invoice template origin, a Google Docs account with Wade's personal Gmail as owner. He circled the ATM withdrawal and pulled the CCTV request form from AIB's website, drafted it for me to sign, and told me to send it via our solicitor so it had teeth. He ate leftover stew out of a styrofoam bowl and told me not to apologize for the salt. Salt is an apology, he said, which made sense to my insides. With Giacomo's map, the solicitor filed a thicker packet to the Gardaí. The charities regulator wrote back thanking us for the fullness of documentation and telling us our duty now was to rebuild governance, dual signature controls on any transfers above 500, a finance subcommittee, and external reporting for 6 months. It felt like homework we should have done years ago. We did it in 2 weeks. In April, the Gardaí called me to view CCTV stills from the AIB ATM. The man in the navy blazer used our charities bank card and withdrew 1-200, cap pulled down against rain. It was Wade. There was a still in which his face turned toward the camera when a gust of wind slapped him sideways, the tie dark plum. Gardaí asked me to confirm. I did. I wrote my name under a line that said, "Witness." He must have felt the walls start to hold. He got aggressive in quieter ways. He wrote a long Facebook post in a private group for Waterford changemakers. claiming that he'd been pushed out for asking hard questions, that certain people wanted to keep back channels open. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Someone sent me a screenshot within 12 minutes. My phone hummed like a wasp nest for 3 days. I wrote a single comment. Factual, crisp, without adjectives. The timeline, the Garda reference number, the charity's regulator filing, the bank holds. I included the new governance rules and invited anyone to volunteer to join the finance subcommittee. Then I logged off and made lasagna for 60 because spite doesn't turn a carrot into anything but a carrot, and dinner doesn't cook itself. The first court date came on 20th of June 2025, District Court in Waterford, pale walls, air that smelled like old paper, and an argument about to start. It was not a dramatic day, it was procedural. His solicitor asked for time to review. The judge asked barristers to keep it brief. I sat with Anna-Marie and Sean on a bench made for smaller spines. Wade stood 3 rows ahead, back of his head familiar enough to make my stomach lurch. He didn't turn around. His shoulders looked like a pair of decisions. In July, AIB notified us that 9,200 had been recovered from the initiative's account after the hold. The rest was subject to ongoing inquiry. The letter was formal, careful, full of words like without prejudice and pending. It felt like someone straightened a picture on a wall in a house that had burned. We kept cooking. We put the recovered money into a ring-fenced capital line, a new combi oven, a freezer that didn't require prayer. We hosted a summer family day where kids decorated biscuits and men who had never iced anything learned they could draw stars with sugar. We printed our governance changes on a poster in the hall where anyone could read them. We made our pain part of our porch. He kept orbiting. He sent a message to a donor saying I was financially naive, as if that made theft a form of care. He stood across the street twice in August, counting our deliveries, phone in his hand like a badge. I logged it. I sent the updates to the Gardaí. The solicitor filed for a protection order in August. The order was granted on 14th of August. A simple sheet of law that said, if he came within 100 meters of the kitchen or my home, he'd be arrested. When the Garda handed me the copy, I let my shoulders drop. I had not realized they had risen high enough to cut off air. The ally I didn't expect arrived in the form of an elderly woman named Nora from Noctifer, who had read about us in the paper and sent a letter with 50 in cash and a story about how a community kitchen had saved her during foot and mouth when she was young. She wrote in a shaky hand, "Make sure that man doesn't undo your goodness," which is a sentence I keep on the wall above the dry goods list. It was followed by a visit from a person I did expect, Giacomo, with a stack of printouts for a grant application to the Community Services Program, and a tin of amaretti he claimed he didn't like, but which vanished from the staff room in an hour. We became friends in the way 2 people become friends when they go through paperwork hell and emerge with their names intact. He asked me, one evening, when the kitchen was clean and dark, if I wanted to see a film in Waterford. We went. The film was mediocre. The company was not. Here is the part where someone expects facile forgiveness or a tidy morale. I don't have that. What I have is better governance, and a freezer we can trust, and a town that remembered who we'd been before we let a man rewrite our ledger. I have courage born, more from repetition than from a rush of heat. Make the call, log the incident, print the statement, sit with the solicitor, feed the children, repeat. On 3rd of September 2025, almost a year to the day from the gala, the prosecution offered a plea: a count of theft, a count of deception, restitution in a schedule, community service, a suspended sentence with a custodial component if he breached the order. I stood in the side hallway with our solicitor and read the paper with the terms. It felt like a compromise with gravity. Anna-Marie squeezed my hand so hard her knuckles whitened. I did not feel triumphant. I felt accurate. The day after the plea, I got a message from an American woman with a Chicago number. She had seen his name, recognized his face from a non-profit he'd helped there, and wanted to tell me something. She didn't offer screenshots or a dramatic reveal. She offered a simple solidarity. You didn't imagine it. He smoothed his sentences like he irons his shirts. He makes you feel you are the fragile one because you care out loud. Her message didn't change anything in court. It changed something in me. Shame is a stubborn stain. Someone else naming it can bleach it just enough. I've resisted telling you my name because this story isn't a brand or a revelation. It's a ledger of small battles fought in a town where rain comes sideways. But names matter, so here. I'm Elena Kovarik. I moved to Ireland at 28, worked as a line cook in a tourist pub, and then somehow ended up chief cook and cleaner for a place that feeds the town's heart when it's hungry. I'm not a hero. I'm stubborn. I am learning to be precise with kindness and ruthless with access. We rebuilt. We now require 2 signatures for any transfer over 500 mine and a trustee. The AP email is owned by the organization with 2FA on a device locked in a safe that has its own log. We publish monthly cash flow updates on a bulletin board where everyone who walks in can read them. We onboard volunteers with a 1-page sheet about boundaries and access that makes some people roll their eyes, but make me breathe easier. We are boring in the right places. We are loud in the kitchen. You want the twist? It's not dramatic. It's circular. On a blustery evening, 12 months after that rain-slick gala, as we set up for a fundraiser that would not be robbed of its soul, I counted the cash with saintly calm. The room smelled like salt and fresh bread. I smiled, and this time, my smile reached my eyes. I put the cash box in the safe and slid the key across the table to Giacomo, who placed it in a drawer and locked the drawer and wrote "Key move to drawer at 2113" on a clipboard we keep next to the till because we now write everything like we mean it. Somewhere in this, Wade sent a final email to wish us well. I summarized it in the log, closed the file, and returned to the raffle table where Petra was arranging the bottles like stained glass. The band played "The Rocky Road to Dublin," too fast and then slower, and people dance the way they do when they know whose side they're on. Rain tapped the windows like knuckles. We counted together the money that would buy potatoes and carrots and dignity in a country where too many things use complicated words to hide ordinary greed. I wrote the total down and printed a PDF and did not kiss it, because we no longer fall in love with columns. We keep them clean, and we feed our town, and we remember the night he called theft strategy, like a man mixing bleach into batter, and we keep the kitchen bright. We finish the night the way we began it, with rain on glass, with hands steady over paper, with the knowledge that some people will always try to rebrand a taking as a favor. We call it what it is, we keep records, and we go on. Because in Dunmore Harbour, the storm passes, the ledger balances, and the children come in hungry the next day, unbothered by the words we had to learn to protect them. And that, in the end, is the only line item that ever mattered.